everyone, and welcome to the part 2 of ladder climbing tutorial series. And in our first part we have set up this functionality that when I press E key, my character enter to the climbing state, ladder climbing state. As you guys can see, my character perform the proper animation and enter to the ladder climbing state. And in this tutorial we will set up the ladder climbing to move up and move down functionality. So let's get started, guys. So now let's first open our third-person character blueprint, and over here when my start ladder climb variable will be true, I'm gonna disable my axis movement. I'm gonna place a branch over here, and when my start ladder climb variable will be false, only this case the add movement input functionality will be worked, like so. So now when I press the movement input, my character is still in its ladder climbing pose. So now let's create a function for ladder to move up and move down. I'm gonna go to the function tab, create a new function and call this ladder climb move up, like so. And in this function I'm gonna use for loop for tracing, and then I'm gonna use sphere trace by channel, and for the start and end location I'm gonna get my vector location, add some constant in z-axis, let's say 120, and add a new vector over here. And in my z-axis I'm gonna grab my for loop index value and multiply it with 10. So this will be my start location for my sphere trace, and for the end location I'm gonna get vector rotation, get forward vector, multiply the forward vector with 50 units and add the result to my start location. Set the sphere radius to something like 5 and draw debug type to for duration. So by using the for loop, this functionality will be worked according to the start and first and last index. Each time 10 units adds in the z-axis when the loop runs. Now when I'm gonna go to the event graph, and when I press W keyboard from ladder climbing, I'm gonna place a branch over here and check if my start ladder climb variable is true. Then I'm gonna call this function ladder climb move up. Now let's check the functionality. So here you guys can see when I press W key, the sphere traces will be worked, and there are 6 traces that are working. So when I press W key, my traces hits to this box collision. So for fixing this issue, I'm gonna go to my project settings create a new collision and trace channel. Create a new trace channel. I'm gonna call this ladder, and this is my new ladder trace channel is set up. Now I'm gonna open this ladder blueprint and select my box collision, set this to ignore all, and for the ladder I'm gonna set this to block. So I'm gonna set the trace response channel ignore all except the ladder. The ladder will be block all. Now I'm gonna open my character blueprint, and when I press E key, I wanna sphere trace against the ladder trace channel. So before, my trace channel is visibility, and now I'm gonna set this to ladder trace channel. And now let's check the functionality again. So here you guys can see, now I have my traces work accordingly. My traces are hit to the ladder other than the volume. Now I'm gonna go to my character blueprint, and over in my ladder climb move up function, I'm gonna use for loop with break, and the first index will be 1 and last index will be 6. And if my sphere trace does hit something, break my hit result. And first I'm gonna check if the impact normal, I'm gonna break the vector. If the z of my normal is less than 0.1, then I'm gonna place a branch over here. And then I'm gonna again sphere trace by channel. The start location will be my impact point of first trace. I'm gonna grab the impact point of my first trace, add 10 units or something like 20 units in z-axis. This will be my start location, and I'm gonna subtract the 25 units in z-axis, and this will be my trace end location. So if this trace does hit something, then I'm gonna break the hit result and check if the initial overlap will be false. Then I'm gonna add a sequence node over here, and for this first node I'm gonna break my loop like so. If my second trace does hit something and the initial overlap of the second trace is false, then I'm gonna first break the loop, and then I'm gonna move my capsule component to the desired location. So I'm gonna create a new output pin that will be my desired location for moving up from the ladder. I'm gonna set the variable type to vector. Now I'm gonna make my vector I'm gonna grab the impact point of my second trace, break the vector, and in my z-axis I'm gonna subtract 90 units from my z-axis. This will be my z location, and for my x and y location, first I'm gonna grab the impact normal of my first trace, make rotation from its x-axis, create a new forward vector, multiply the forward vector with 30, and add this result to the impact point of my second trace. Now I'm gonna break this result. This will be my x and y location. So in this function I'm gonna first check if my first trace does it something. Then I'm gonna use my second trace, that will be from top to bottom. If the trace does it something and the initial overlap will be false, then I'm gonna output the desired location for moving up. And now I'm gonna grab my move capsule component and move my capsule component to the desired location. The target relative rotation will be my get actor rotation, and the overtime will be 0.5, let's say. And now let's check the functionality. So as you guys can see, when I press W key, my character move according to the each step of ladder, but the hands are not aligned properly with the ladder step. Now I'm gonna go to the ladder climb move up function, and instead of subtract 90 units, I'm gonna subtract 130 units in z-axis. And now let's check the functionality again. I think 110 units will be fine. As you guys can see, now when I press W key, my character perform the desired functionality and move exactly to the next spot of our ladder step. So now our moving up functionality is properly working fine from ladder. Now we will set up the functionality for moving down. I'm gonna duplicate this function and call this ladder climb move down. And now I'm gonna set the desired sphere trace location for my moving down function. I'm gonna get my actor location and add 100 units in my z-axis. And now instead of multiplying the index value to positive 10 units, I'm gonna multiply it with negative 10 units so that it works downward side. Each time the loop runs, the sphere trace location will be minus 10 units downwards, and all the remaining functionality will be same, like so. Now I'm gonna search for S keyboard event. When I press S keyboard, I'm gonna place a branch and check if my start ladder climb is true. then I'm gonna call my function ladder climb moving down, like so. So there is one more check that we are gonna set before move my component to the desired location. I'm gonna go to the function, create a new variable for my output pin and call this can move, set this to boolean, promote this variable to a local variable, can move from ladder. So if all the checks are working properly, then I'm gonna set this variable to true, can move from ladder to true. If my initial overlap will be false, then I'm gonna set this variable to false. If the second trace didn't hit anything, also in this case my can move from ladder variable will be false. And if the impact normal is greater than 0.1, then my can move from ladder variable will be false. And also in this case, when my first trace didn't hit anything, then also in this case my can move from ladder variable will be false. So if all the checks are true, then only in this case my can move from ladder variable will be true. So now we're gonna set the same functionality for ladder climb move down. I'm gonna create a new output pin, call this can move, promote this to a local variable and call this can move from ladder. If all the checks are true, then I'm gonna set the can move from ladder variable to true. And if any of the check is false, then I'm gonna set this variable to false. Same as we have done previously for the ladder climb move up function. Now I'm gonna go to the event graph, place a branch over here. If can move is true, only in this case we're gonna perform the move up functionality. Similarly, when we press S keyboard, if the can move is true, then we're gonna set the desired capsule location or move our capsule component to the desired location. Now let's check the functionality. So as you guys can see, when I press W keyboard, my character moves properly to the next step of ladder, and when I press S keyboard, my character didn't move down, and there is something wrong in our ladder climb move down function. So here, when all the checks are true, we need to set the can move from ladder variable to true. Now let's check the functionality again. When I press W keyboard, my character move up, and when I press S keyboard, my character move downwards to the exact spot of my ladder. So this functionality now working with dynamic ladder steps. As you guys can see, I have changed the ladder steps and all my functionality is working accordingly. So I hope you guys like this video, and in our next tutorial we will set up the proper animations for moving up and moving down with proper right and left hand accordingly. So don't forget to subscribe my YouTube channel, and also you can support me on Patreon and gain access to the all project files. So thank you guys.